Now the topic that you guys have been actually waiting for, and that's mechanical injury. First definition. Mechanical injury refers to kinetic injury inflicted due to a mechanical force or a physical or a mechanical force. Alright, classification. Mechanical injury is classified on the basis of striking surface. I repeat, listen carefully. On the basis of, a lot of you guys get it wrong, striking surface of the weapon. It is not classified just on the basis of weapon itself, but instead on the basis of striking surface of the weapon. It's not mentioned in lots of book, and even teachers while teaching don't explain this properly. See, what is this? This is a pair of scissors. Can this be used as a weapon? Yes, this can be used as a weapon. Is it a single weapon? This is a single individual weapon. How can I use it? See, I can use the blunt handle of the scissor, to strike you, to cause blunt force injury. Or I could use the sharp edge of the scissor to cut your throat, to split your throat, causing sharp force injury. Or I could use the pointed end of the same scissor to penetrate your body, to stab your guts out, causing a puncture injury. So here's the weapon is the same. It's the pair of scissors. But depending on the striking surface of the same scissor, you have different types of mechanical injuries being inflicted on you. So when I used the blunt handle of the scissor to strike you, you were inflicted with a blunt force injury. When I used the sharp margin of the scissor to cut your throat, it inflicted sharp force injury. And when I used the pointed end of the scissor to penetrate inside your body, it inflicted puncture injury. So that's how you have blunt force injury, a sharp force injury, and a stab force injury. Under mechanical injury, the gunshot injury is also mentioned, but that will be taught in a different video of its own. Under blunt force injury, you have 4 different types of injuries. So there's abrasion, there's bruise, there's laceration, and then finally fracture. I'll explain them all with the help of a single diagram. So for now, I'm just jotting them down. Try just to remember the names of these different injuries. Sharp force injury, depending on whether it is as a result of a light cutting weapon, for example, a knife, right? Light cutting weapon, a knife or a scalpel, you get incision. But if it is a heavy cutting weapon, right? Heavy cutting weapon like a chopper on an axe, you get a chop. Due to a stab force injury, you get a puncture wound or a puncture injury. Okay. With that, we are done with the classification of mechanical injury as well. Now, let me show you all these various types of mechanical injury with the help of a single diagram or a single piece of skin tissue. So the outermost layer of the skin is your epidermis. Just below epidermis is a much thicker layer referred to as dermis. Remember, epidermis doesn't have any blood vessel, so an injury to epidermis does not lead to bleeding. Similarly, injury to epidermis does not lead to scar formation. Dermis contains blood vessels, so an injury to dermis leads to bleeding as well as scar formation. The very first type of mechanical injury is abrasion. In abrasion, remember, it is only the epidermis that is involved. There is scraping of the epithelial tissue of the epidermis. As a result, in abrasion, there is no bleeding and there is no scar formation. Abrasion is also the most common type of mechanical injury, plus it is the most medico-legally important type of mechanical injury. However, sometimes the abrasion might be deep enough to reach papillary dermis, and when the abrasion reaches papillary dermis, then there can be little bleed. Next, in line is bruise. In bruise, what happens is that following a blunt force injury, the blood vessels in the dermis gets ruptured. There is rupture of the blood vessel in the dermis. As a result, the blood from inside the blood vessel leaks out, or there is extravasation, and there is clot formation. Some of this blood, it leaks into the dermis, which is appreciable in the form of discoloration over the skin. So this discoloration over the skin accompanied with the blood clot underneath is bruise. Following bruise, you have laceration. Laceration means to tear. If you take a piece of paper and tear it, what do you get? You get irregular margin of the torn paper. Similarly, if you take your skin and tear it, what do you get? You will get the irregular margin of your skin. Irregular margin of the skin like this. So this is laceration. Then below the skin, there's muscle and then there's bone. When the bone gets broken, this is referred to as a fracture. So abrasion, bruise, laceration and fracture, they fall under blunt force injury. These are all blunt force injury, BFI. Up next, sharp force injury. Under sharp force injury, there are two. One, due to a light cutting weapon, you get an incision. So this is an incision due to a light cutting weapon. See, laceration means to tear. Incision means to cut. When you tear a piece of paper, you get irregular margin. When you cut a piece of paper, you get regular sharp margin. Similarly, when you tear your skin, you get irregular margin. And when the skin is cut, you get regular margin. That's how you differentiate laceration from incision. Then another sharp force injury is as a result of a much heavier cutting weapon, and that leads to a much bulkier, larger cut, which is referred to as a chop. In chop, even the organs underlying the skin like bone, muscles, they get damaged and fractured. Alright, with that you are also done with the sharp force injury. Okay, you are done with the sharp force injury. And finally, you have stab force injury. What do you get in stab force injury? In stab force injury, you get a stab. Now the question is, how do you differentiate a stab from an incision? Both of them have regular margin. The difference is in the dimension. See, this is a puncture wound. This is a puncture wound or a stab wound. In incision, the length is greater than the depth. But in stab or puncture, the depth is longer than the length. Come on, it makes sense. Just look here. If I use a sharp object to inflict an incision like this, it's gonna be against the skin like this. As a result, the length is going to be longer than the depth. But if I use the pointed end of a weapon to stab my body, then it's gonna penetrate inside my body. As a result, the depth is gonna be more than the length. On one hand, in case of incision, I'm just cutting the tissue, right? So the length becomes greater than the depth. On the other hand, in stab force, in puncture, I'm penetrating the tissue. So the depth is gonna be more than length. Okay, time for revision. What do you see here? You see only the epidermis is involved and there is no bleeding. So this is obviously abrasion. What can you appreciate? I can appreciate the length of the abrasion and the breadth of the abrasion. So length times breadth. Second, what do you see? I can see discoloration over the skin, probably due to a clot underneath. So this is a bruise. What can I appreciate? I can appreciate the length of the bruise and the breadth of the bruise. So length times breadth. However, in a dead body, in a cadaver, if I cut the bruise, if I incise the bruise, I can also appreciate the depth of the clot, that is how deep the clot is. Or this is what I mean. So I can appreciate the length of the clot, I can appreciate the length of the bruise, I can appreciate the breadth of the bruise, and if I cut or incise the bruise, I can also see how deep the clot is. Then here, what you can see a tear in the tissue, and the tear has irregular margin. So this is most probably laceration. You can appreciate the length of the laceration, the breadth of the laceration, and the depth of the laceration. So length times breadth times depth. Finally, what do you see here? You see a regular margin with lots of bleeding as well. This is a cut. I can appreciate this is a cut, this is a light cut or incision. I can appreciate the length, I can appreciate the breadth, I can appreciate the depth as well. So length times breadth times depth. See, another way you can differentiate between incision and laceration is in terms of bleeding. Okay, fine, laceration has irregular margin and incision has regular margin. Along with that, in laceration, the base is crushed. As a result, the blood vessel is crushed. So there is less blood that leaks out. So there is less bleeding. However, in incision, the blood vessel is freshly cut. As a result, blood can come out very easily. So there is more bleeding. That is why here you can see there is less bleeding, and in a incision, you can see there's lots of bleeding. What is this? This also has a regular margin. So it's a cut. It's a cut force injury. It's a sharp force injury. But then this sharp force injury is much vigorous, larger in size. It has even led to fracture of the skull underneath. So this is a sharp force injury due to a heavy cutting weapon, that is a chop. Length times breadth times depth can be appreciated. Finally, what is this? Here, a pointed weapon has been used to penetrate inside the neck of this person like this. Right? So this is a puncture wound. What can you appreciate? I can appreciate the length of the puncture, the depth of the puncture, the breadth of the puncture, and how deep the weapon was inserted. That is the depth of the puncture. I can appreciate the length of the puncture, the breadth of the puncture, and the depth of the puncture. And with that, I have given you the basic overview of all the various types of mechanical injury. Now, let's dive deep into each one of them one by one.